to catch up with David Coulthard. Peter.
Yes, with David Coulthard. David, what sort of morning was it for you?
Well, I think we were really trying to extract as much information as possible for the race. And so although we were down in 10th place or so, I don't think we should be too concerned about that. Obviously we'll find out a little bit more in the next session.
What's the handling like?
Well, it's pretty evenly balanced, and it's understeer and oversteer, but obviously I need to reduce both of those to go quicker, so I need more grip.
Well, very best of luck. We'll let you get on.
Thanks.
Good to hear from David briefly before he gets ready for the start of this session. It's only just under 9 minutes until they're back out on track. Looking at the speed trap classification, that speed that Michael Schumacher set, 313 kilometres per hour, about 195 miles per hour, and set, John, with the new Ferrari. And as you mentioned earlier, that is a brand new Ferrari engine. They haven't been able to run it in the 2001 chassis.
No, that engine is dedicated to the 2002 car, and it's a pretty impressive speed. Now again, downforce springs to mind, but other teams are doing similar things, and there's not much sign of a Williams or a McLaren in those top times, and it was in fact Jones and Saubers that were making up the bulk of the arrows as well, are those in the top 6 in terms of straight line speeds before they break into turn 1.
Looking further on down the list, you can see Button was quite a long way down, but nonetheless put in a reasonably quick lap time. So it does depend on the balance of aerodynamic downforce and how much drag that therefore creates. The more downforce, remember, the more drag created by the wings and the aerodynamics of the car, and therefore reducing the top speed. But conditions just about perfect. A little bit of breeze, as you can see, but nothing that's really going to affect the cars on track.
The only thing is that the track temperature has gone up by about 3 degrees, 2 degrees since we saw the cars come off track. Air temperature is remaining the same. Humidity is a little bit. I mean, these conditions are what we used to see when the Brazilian Grand Prix was actually held in the last weekend of January, and I can assure you then it was unbelievable. The heat was just, you had to hide from it, you just couldn't stand out in it.
Well, it is hot, but it's not quite as oppressive as it can be, as you say, at different times of the year, and also probably not quite as oppressive as it was in Malaysia. Rubens Barrichello will be hoping to get a few more laps in this second free practice session, having spun off the road in the first session and only completed a few laps. He'll be anxious indeed to get back out. He only did 3 timed laps this morning, so not much experience gained with last year's car. He'll be, of course, a little disappointed, as we've heard, not to be in one of the 2002 cars, particularly after testing it last week in Barcelona and really enjoying it.
I think Rubens really is disappointed that he hasn't got it in F2002 to join Michael Schumacher, but just the pressure of work and the fact that Ferrari are running a dual program. We're looking down just into the Jordan team as they check the brakes, a little bit of brake bleeding going on, but I think Rubens Barrichello, well, let's say reassured in knowing that he's got a car that is a fundamentally reliable car, and still a very, I mean, anybody would just give you almost a week's salary to drive a Ferrari in a Grand Prix.
Absolutely. Well, he's got a great opportunity.
Didn't want to get carried away on that one then.
He's got a great opportunity with a great team, and it just doesn't seem to come together for him here in Brazil when he's been with Ferrari. So, well, let's just hope that things improve this time.
And there is, I'm going to say the sprawl. I mean, Sao Paulo is just an amazing city. It's unlike anywhere else in South America that I've visited. And first time I came here, well, Interlagos was, 20 kilometres outside the city centre. Now the city centre is almost Interlagos.
I mentioned, we see little bits of debris out on the track, and of course we saw a few punctures in that first session, so hopefully they can get rid of bits and pieces like that. I'm not quite sure exactly where that is on the track, but obviously it's not a good sign to have bits and pieces around. Meanwhile, Peter Windsor's back down in the pit lane, and he's caught up with the BMW engine chief, Mario Tyson.
Mario, early days yet, of course, but how's it going so far?
Doesn't look too bad. The weather is quite good for us. It's hot, and as we saw in Malaysia, under hot conditions, we are quite okay, to say the least. We are okay again, temperature-wise, with the engine, so we can go closed, and looks quite good. The cars are strong, and I expect us to be fighting for the front row.
The new Ferrari engine looks to be quite quick on the speed traps in that morning session. Is that something you factor in at this stage?
It was a bit surprising, but I don't know under which conditions the car was raced this morning. So let's see tomorrow.
Now, perhaps you should know, I was talking to the race organizer a bit earlier, and he said that fine weather right to race day, and then there's going to be a bit of rain in the middle of the race. What do you think about that?
I hope he's wrong. I would prefer rain at about 5 p.m.
Okay, very best of luck anyway to you.
Cool down.
Thank you.
So Mario Tyson in charge of the BMW engine program, and certainly producing plenty of horsepower. That great 1-2 finish for Williams BMW last time out in Malaysia. They want to build on that success here this weekend. But there's the man they've got to beat. Michael Schumacher, involved in the incident with Juan Pablo Montoya at the beginning of the last race. And I'm sure that we're going to see more wheel-to-wheel action between those two as this season progresses. Huge support for Ferrari. We might be in Brazil, but wherever you go in the world, there's always a huge contingent of Ferrari fans, and here they are once again.
Of course, there are very, very many expat Italians in Sao Paulo as well, and anytime anything Italian is up for offers, then they will be out, and be it football, Grand Prix, whatever, and their support of their beloved Ferrari team is unrivaled by any team in Formula One.
They've enjoyed 6 victories in Brazil over the years, the Ferrari team. Of course, last one was in 2000, with Michael Schumacher taking the victory. Before that, it had been back in 1990 with Alain Prost. Now, the Saubers, as we saw, were going extremely quickly this morning. And Peter, I gather you've caught up with Peter Sauber himself.
Yes, I'm with Peter Sauber. Peter, another good morning for you. I suppose that you're getting used to these now.
Yes, it was a good morning, but don't forget it's Friday, and it's Friday morning. It's too early to say something about the performance.
Now, let's talk about Jos Verstappen. A little bit unhappy there. Of course, you signed him as a test driver, or you agreed to run him as a test driver, and he's a bit too big for the car.
We spoke with him as a spare driver, because we don't need a test driver. We have only one test car. That's not enough for a test driver, but as a spare driver, yes. But it's impossible to put him in the car. Especially, it's impossible to share a T car together with one of our small drivers.
Yes, you seem to specialize in getting these very quick, very small drivers.
Yes, but I think that's it's by accident in our in our case. we don't look for small and light drivers.
But it is unfortunate, though, but of course it's totally understandable. The chassis is effectively tailored to the shape of the drivers you have. And you got very good combination with Heidfeld and Massa, of course.
Yes, of course. Both are exactly the same height and also the same weight.
Very, very good. Well, best of luck for the remaining session this afternoon.
Thank you.
So the deal not done with Jos Verstappen. Of course, third drivers have been doing a lot of work since Malaysia, haven't they, John? We spoke to Luca Badoer earlier. Sorry, not Luca Badoer. He works with Ferrari. We spoke to Luciano Berti earlier on. He also has been testing with Ferrari. Alexander Wurz has been doing a lot of work for McLaren Mercedes. Marc Genet has been working for Williams. They've been doing a lot of mileage.
Yeah. They now call them their third race driver. They don't call them test drivers any longer. And of course, if something happened to any of the team's regular 1 and 2 drivers, then the third driver would be put into place. But the problem that Sauber had was that he builds his car around Nick Heidfeld and Felipe Massa. So if you don't need to build a car to accommodate Jos Verstappen, well, then you don't do so. But remember, last year he had Kimi Räikkönen. Now Räikkönen's taller than Massa and Heidfeld, so they had to make a compromise. But of course, as soon as you have to start making compromises, then that is somewhere. It's not a weakness, but it's a compromise.
Well, yes, certainly Räikkönen not one of the shortest drivers on the grid, but it does make a difference, as we talked earlier on about airbox as well, and airflow around the airbox. Takuma Sato, well, he's not particularly tall, but he's certainly very fiery once he gets into the cockpit. We saw him earlier on in the first free practice session, sliding around. Great car control, fantastic reflexes this young man has.
Well, the catch that he made in qualifying in Malaysia 2 weeks ago was just absolutely awesome. I mean, we thought for sure he's going to go spinning across the grass and whatever, but his reactions are just so bright, so sharp. And he caught the first one, then he kept the car straight on the grass, and then he did the right thing off the grass. Then he started to put turning steering lock into the car. So clearly reactions of, I mean, cat-like is an expression you might use. Very, very, very quick young guy.
Rubens Barrichello getting ready to come out in the Ferrari 2001 car. Let's hope he gets a few more laps in this time than he did last time around. And after spinning off earlier on, had to sit out and watch. I wonder if he learnt anything, sitting and watching cars coming around that infield section, very tight and twisty, as we mentioned earlier. Speed's dropping down to about 45 miles an hour. They're using first gear on a couple of those hairpins, so it really is about how much grip the tyres and the suspension provide rather than how much downforce the aerodynamics provide. And there's a man with the same problem, really. Not many laps in that first session, now trying to make up for it in the second.
Yeah, David Coulthard, well, 11th quickest for whatever that was worth. He only did 13 laps. Now, you can say the team deliberately decided to do as a few laps as possible. They didn't see any significant value. I tend to think if you've got the laps available, then you should run them. And certainly in terms of information gathering about the tyres, that's the first thing you want to do. You want to make a decision as to which tyre choice you're going to go with. But just in terms of general knowledge, the more you can run, the more you're going to learn, and therefore the more you can draw on when you have to make those crucial decisions.
Kimi Raikkonen heads out in the McLaren. Mark Webber already on track at the moment as David Coulthard is fitted into his car and ready for this second 1 hour session. As you can see, the clock counting away already. Michael Schumacher fastest in the first session this morning by around a second over his brother Ralf Schumacher in the Williams. Third was Giancarlo Fisichella. Fourth and fifth were the two Saubers of Heidfeld and Massa. Sixth was Bernoldi. Was Jenson Button, this man's teammate, R03, a bit further down. He was 12th. Behind Button, Sato was 8th, then Montoya 9th, Frentzen 10th, ahead of Coulthard. Truly, as we mentioned, Villeneuve, McNish, De La Rosa, Panis, Sarlo. Irvine was 18th, Raikkonen 19th after only doing the 5 laps. Mark Webber and Alex Young for Minardi were 20th and 21st, and Rubens Barrichello was last, having not really set a time in his Ferrari.
Well, just looking into the McLaren pits, there's a message, I think, when David Coulthard left the pits on a previous run, he laid a bit of rubber down. And that's often actually a sign of frustration on the part of the driver. Or simply maybe the guys are saying, hurry up, come on, quick, you can get out before a car coming down the pit lane gets to a point where Coulthard would maybe have lost 5-10 seconds waiting.
It's always worth getting some clear air, and we've got a number of cars actually coming onto the circuit now. Here comes Michael Schumacher. The Bridgestone tyres worked well this morning, and certainly he put in some quick laps. Now let's see whether he just works on setup and perhaps does some more race pace type running. That's what they're working on here on the Friday, and they've got perfect conditions in which to do it. Running a fair bit of fuel. They've got to watch the ride heights of the cars quite carefully around this track because of the bumpy nature of it. So you've got to run a fair bit of fuel in, see how much the car bottoms out, and then make your calculations for the race.
Yes, it's one of those critical things that teams are constantly monitoring, and if you happen to run your car very low or maybe very, very soft, then you can actually run the car to a point where it will become illegal, and that's a point that everybody, when the race is over, they sit almost cross-legged, everything's crossed to make sure that the car actually does pass the very, very strict post-race scrutineering.
Yes, in fact, David Coulthard got disqualified just a couple of years ago in 2000 because the front wing end plates weren't right, and that was partly as a result of wear as well. So they do have to be very, very aware of the bumps and the difference that can make and the wear created as a result. On board here with Kimi Raikkonen.
Yeah, taking tons of curb, and Raikkonen obviously realised. And easy to fall into the trap of maybe going too quickly too soon, but he'll feel that there's more grip now on the racetrack than there was when he was out in that first session. He'll feel it particularly in the lower speed corners where there's more rubber going down. In the high speed parts of circuit, well, the downforce of the car takes over, and that isn't really a problem. But breaking down, this is the corner where he made that mistake at the beginning of session 1.
Yes, and again he's having to apply quite a lot of opposite lock, but he keeps it all pointing in the right direction this time, so he's survived that. And we're just watching the Ferrari going round at the moment of Rubens Barrichello, right on board with him. He was giving a bit of a wave to the fans when he went out earlier on. Now he's got to focus on getting some laps completed, and that's what he's doing. Coming across the line, this is his first proper timed lap of the 2 free practice sessions so far, and it puts him into an immediate 8th position, so good effort that at the beginning of this second session of free practice. Accelerates out of the left-hander at the Curva de Sol and then up to speed, but we'll switch our attention now to Michael Schumacher. Quite a few cars around for him though.
Well, he's got both the Jordans ahead of him, and Michael will, of course, coming at the worst part of track, and Sato not getting out of the way early enough, stops Michael building up the momentum as he would have liked to have done as he comes out of this long uphill corner, virtually 3 corners. He'll probably have lost in the initial part of the straight 10 to 15 miles an hour. He'll pick up some of it as he comes across start-finish line, but it will have spoiled the beginning of this lap. Locks up that inside wheel as he dives into turn 1. So certainly he's trying to make up for the last time.
Well, he and Sato seem to be having a bit of a running confrontation. They held each other up in qualifying the last race in Malaysia. Michael got his own back after Takuma had held up one of Michael's run, and it seems to be going on at this rate. Of course, in this session it's not so critical, so I don't think that there'll be any payback, but Sato's going to have to watch out for Schumacher and try not to get in his way this weekend, I think. Across the line here comes Rubens Barrichello, and that puts him up to 5th fastest with a 1:16.980. So now that he's actually getting some laps under his belt, he's proving once again the Ferrari quick, and Michael's gone off, and look, that's caused a spin for Sato.
Well, it certainly is proving to be a testing time, not for the young Japanese. This time he was the victim, and there we see one of the two Benettons also has gone off track, R03, and that's down, coming up onto start-finish straight, so spins all over the place. Well, that's just looking down at the time, the two that were the biggest losers this morning, Raikkonen and Barrichello, they're currently 4th and 5th, but now it's the turn of R03, and we saw Michael Schumacher.
Yeah, that's right. We saw Michael have a spin in the first session, and now we see him having a spin in the second session as well. So let's hope that they get themselves sorted out. Sato back on track, so he didn't stall the engine, no problem there. Michael Schumacher has continued on his way. Let's take a little look at the replay, spot what happened. Well, he just went wide, didn't he? Just didn't get turned in at all.
No, it was just as if he... there's a problem under braking, maybe he came in just too hard under braking, decided rather than attempting to take the corner, he take the wide line around, but of course Takuma Sato, who was behind, didn't know what to do. Probably was so traumatized by what happened earlier at the end of the previous lap.
Well, the Trulli comes back in the Renault, back into the pit garage after a little incident himself. The positions remaining the same.
Yeah, no, how is the engine? Better, but you know, we'll change something else also.
A little bit of radio chat between Trulli and the team. We heard from Pat Simmons earlier on that there was a slight pickup problem with the engine on his car, so it looks as though they're just trying to solve that one. Meanwhile, Kimi Raikkonen has come up to 4th fastest now, so that's a big improvement for the Finn in the McLaren Mercedes, and really quite what we would expect. And now as the rubber goes down, John, this is what we tended to see last time in Malaysia, was that the Michelin users started to really feature once there was more rubber down and the temperatures were climbing.
Yes, I think Ron Dennis summed it up pretty well. He said, you know, we know that the track will come to us. We're not particularly concerned about being quickest. It would be nice if we were, but they know that by the time we finish this afternoon, the situation will be different to how we started. And again, watching, look at the way the Sauber slides through the Senna chicane. We'd slide through the pit lane and have a look at some of the girlfriends.
Well, in with the McLaren Mercedes pit here, and both cars are currently in the pits, as Michael Schumacher's still out there. Barrichello's gone to 2nd fastest, so that's a good effort from the Ferrari driver.
Well, Rubens quickly into the rhythm, picks up the pace. Montoya again understeer as he comes to the bottom of that Senna chicane. You can see the front wheels flicking to the right. As we now look up the straight, Barrichello, but Montoya comes down 0.3 of a second away from Michael Schumacher. That first, he's got a problem, I'm sure. Front end grip is the reason why he lost 3 seconds in a 19-second segment. 0.3 of a second.
So let's just keep an eye on Montoya for a second into this tight section on the infield. This is one of the tight right-handers taken in first gear. Quick change up to 2nd. They don't really brake for the left-hander. They just stabilise the car a bit, then back on the power. Then reasonably quick before slowing right down again into the very tight right-hander again in first gear. And just going fairly slowly there. That was one of the Ferraris.
Barrichello, he let Montoya go through. He didn't. He probably wants to start a lap. He doesn't want to have traffic closing to him, so he wants to have a clean start to a lap. As Montoya comes up now to complete another flying lap. So Montoya currently 12th quickest, 1:17.661. So he will seek, well, a good second, a little bit quicker to make him look a little bit happier. Well, he's gone up to 8th place, 1:17.081.
So good effort.
Giancarlo is such an outrageously good driver anyway, and this is probably one of his favourite tracks. If we look back at history, you always find he scrambles himself on no matter what car he's got onto the podium here. And fingers crossed, I'd really like to finish up in that position myself Sunday evening.
Now, looking back at the last race in Malaysia, of course, we saw that rather awkward incident when Sato climbed over the back of Giancarlo's car. Did you actually have words yourself with Takuma after that?
I didn't have too many words, but it was enough in this instance to know exactly my feelings on the situation and how it must never ever happen again. It was pretty brutal, but then it just needed to be said and then forgotten about and got on with it.
It is, John, here. It's not like you to be short of too many words. Normally you've got too many sometimes.
It is not part of our history, John. You and I together, we never stuck for a few words in the given moment.
Never draw breath, EJ.
But in this particular occasion, I mean, you could have dwelled on it for a long time. This is a young boy who has really got a lot of talent. He's getting a little bit carried away. He wants to do everything today and yesterday. I mean, he has to learn certain things, but they shouldn't hurt or, if you like, cut back on the performance of the team. And this was a particularly unnecessary incident, and he was so apologetic about it, but then at the end of the day, so he should. But he was very magnanimous in what has happened, but the team is the one who takes the suffer, and we've had a couple of situations whereby, you know, sponsors and the people were very keen to get points on the board as quickly as possible.
Great. Well, thanks, Eddie, and let's hope that the two boys behave themselves here in Brazil this weekend.
Cheers.
Thank you very much. Well, we've just seen Jarno Trulli stopped at the side of the track there, John, so bad news for Renault. Jenson Button was watching the monitor from in his pit garage. There he is. But Jarno Trulli's car has something's gone wrong when he's out of the car now.
Yeah, he just pulled the car off to the side of the track, and for Trulli again, another driver who's going to lose the best part of 46 minutes of this session, and a very disappointing start to a weekend there. You see the Italian standing by the side of the track. I think that's probably just actually the exit of the pit lane, where the cars blend back into the circuit. Difficult just to tell.
Exactly where he is, yeah. Rubens is back in the pits, as you can see. Second fastest, we've got a Ferrari 1-2 at the moment. A new car and old car. Michael Schumacher setting the pace in the earlier session, and that still about, well, nearly 9/10 of a second off for Rubens Barrichello in the 2001 chassis. Then it's the Williams BMW of Ralf Schumacher, the Jordan Honda of Fisichella, and then the McLaren Mercedes of Kimi Raikkonen, the two Sauber Petronas of Heidfeld and Montoya. Montoya is 7th for Williams BMW, then 8th is the Sauber of Massa, then 9th Bernoldi, 10th is Panis, and 11th Villeneuve. So the two BARs have moved up the order just a little bit in recent times. Button's down in 12th. If we look further on down the list, we can see that the Toyotas are a bit further down now. McNish in 17th, Silo in 19th, and I'm afraid that Irvine finds himself still down in 20th position, having completed 20 laps.
Well, Jaguar is still not having very much joy. They realise that the work they're going to do is focused on the aerodynamic side of the car. But just looking into the Williams pits, Ralf Schumacher's car, and again Pierre de Pasquet looking at the front tyres on Ralph's just to check that tyre wear is as predicted by the tyre manufacturer. Montoya just comes in, momentarily stops before his box does a start, and very quickly the team cover up the aerodynamic parts. They don't want any of the journalists that sort of moonlight in the pit lane with digital cameras snapping something that would be valuable.
A little bit of radio there from Montoya as he describes the behaviour of the car, and I'm sure we'll be hearing more from Juan Pablo over the course of the weekend on the onboard radio, talking to his race engineer Tony Ross. We've heard plenty of great stuff from both of them in the first two Grand Prix this year in Australia and Malaysia. Now, as we said, the BAR seems to be moving up the order a little bit. Jacques Villeneuve here is on a personal better lap. This should move him up from 11th. Yes, it does. It puts him up into 5th place. That's a little bit more like it.
Well, that's a significant jump in times, but again, you know, it's just a given lap at a particular point. We're just some 15 minutes into the session. And now they're talking about adjustments on the rear shock absorbers. The bump control on the shock absorbers, that controls the back of the car, particularly over a bumpy circuit like The circuit here in Interlagos was resurfaced, in fact, in 2000. But I think probably the basis of the circuit is such it's built very close to a lake. There is water around it, so it tends to deteriorate fairly rapidly, and that's one of the reasons why teams have difficulty in setting a car up. They need to set a car up fairly soft to cope with the bumps, but then they have to control the roll that goes along with it. So it's always one of the more difficult race tracks around the calendar to get a car set up absolutely perfect.
Now we're watching Giancarlo Fisichella here, and 19.6 over that first sector, so this doesn't look like any particular improvement from the Italian, but as Eddie said earlier on, he always seems to drag a good result here in Brazil. He was 6th in 1998, finished 3rd here in 2000, and even last year when they had that Renault-powered Benetton, which really wasn't a great car, John, was it? It was one of the worst cars in terms of expectation, at least, for last year. He still managed to get a point in 6th place.
Fisichella comes across the line, goes 3rd quickest. Further improvement, 16.539. Interesting that Honda are saying that we have improvements in the pipeline. We're sort of giving them a fairly hard time, and I know that both BAR and Jordan are doing the same thing. Well, certainly both the BAR and the Jordan in the top 5. Fisichella has just gone 3rd on the 16.5. Villeneuve in 5th and 16.6. 10th of a second between the two teams, between two different chassis. Very close.
It's good to see. Let's hope that is shown again in qualifying tomorrow, although having seen the performances of the two Honda-powered teams in the first two Grand Prix, and we gather that there aren't any major changes coming from Honda for one or two more races, then I would expect perhaps to see them drop back down a little bit. But hopefully in that battle with Sauber and with Renault, could be an incredibly close qualifying session between those teams for best of behind Williams, Ferrari and McLaren. Oh, and somebody's taken a little trip wide.
Yes.
That's Panis, I think. He had a spin a moment ago, and Olivier's just gone wide again there.
Just coming on to the start. That's the long sequence of corners on to start, finish straight. We're watching David Coulthard. Coulthard personally quickest in that first segment, 19.3 against the best we've seen so far, 19.1. So Coulthard doing a bit of catch-up. But again, these teams have got an agenda. They do try to stick with it. The trouble is if a driver goes off track, makes an error. We saw David do that in the first session. We saw Raikkonen lose virtually all of the first session. That program then gets sort of slightly thrown into disarray.
Still, he's been giving a good go now. You can see he's really pushing the McLaren hard, just using the curve. You can see the bumps, see how it affects the back of the car there, bouncing away as it climbs up the hill under full throttle. Now building up to top speed of about 190, 195 miles an hour as he comes to cross the line. This is going to be a good lap, and he goes P1. David Coulthard, fastest.
Indeed, I mean, we saw that was coming because he was quickest of everybody in that middle section, and all of a sudden McLaren are the quickest car on the circuit, 1:15.301. That's some 0.3 of a second ahead of Ferrari, and now there'll be a few smiles appearing on the McLaren pits.
Well, there's a delight down there for McLaren, I'm sure, though they were fastest in Malaysia on the Friday, remember, and it didn't quite work out for them for the...
I'm down at the Renault garage, Ben, and the news about R03 is that the car just stalled as he left the pit lane there, so bad luck for him. Standing where I am, it's interesting to see Interlagos and its character. Very, very high pit wall here. That's because a lot of elevation change here between the pit lane and the main straight there, so there's no pit wall steeper than this in Formula One. But much more significantly, this is the longest pit lane, if you include the entrance and the exit, on the Formula One calendar, and it's approximately 42 seconds from the minute you start peeling into the pit lane to leaving it there. So that is something obviously all the teams are going to bring into their calculations tonight and tomorrow night when they start to work out their strategies. Last year, remember, 1 or 2 stops seem to be the way to go, so there's a lot of variables up in the air this weekend.
Yes, we'll watch closely to see what the teams do, and certainly in the past, as you say, both strategies have been adopted, both have been successful, so the teams will have to base their decision on tyre wear as much as anything else, and until they do these laps today and try and establish how quickly the tyre goes off or how well it keeps the performance, then they can work out the strategy.
Yeah, we looked at it, we had an on-board view from Coulthard's car. Coulthard looked to me like he was on a fresh set of rubber as Raikkonen almost gets it wrong in that Ferradura corner. He seemed to hit a bump. The car got a bit of a head stagger shake. But back to David Coulthard, his last lap was 1:18.8, was half a second slower, but now in that first segment he's again quickest of everybody by 0.02 of a second from David Coulthard.
Well, that's a good effort, but Coulthard himself is on a quick lap. Let's take a look. First segment, fastest so far. Second segment, 38.7, 3/10 down on the fastest so far. So this is going to be marginal as to whether he can improve on his previous best lap that has seen him go fastest. Let's just watch him as he comes up to cross the line. And, well, it's just a tenth of a second slower than his previous best, but some good consistent fast laps here from David Coulthard, the winner here in Brazil 12 months ago.
Michael Schumacher out on track again. He's completed his out lap. He's about to come across start-finish line to start a flying lap. So Schumacher, can he respond, or are Ferrari even concerned at this point about responding to what McLaren have just done?
Seventh, Raikkonen 8th, Heidfeld 9th, Montoya 10th, Bernoldi 11th, then it's Panis, Button, Sato and Frentzen, top 15, and Michael Schumacher. Spun, but has he kept it running this time? Yes, he has. The engine's still going. That's the important thing. Oh dear.
I mean, almost. I thought he was going to get it, but he took so much curb. I wondered if that had something to do. Let's watch again as he comes. This is out of the exit of the Ferradura. Turns, and now watch the amount of curb he takes. Did he actually hook a wheel over the grass? Did that lead to it, or was it just there was little grip on that curb at this point in the race, or point of the practice?
Now, you were saying, John, earlier on about the fact that Ferrari came here last year and ran the cars they reckoned a bit too stiff to deal with the bumps and things. I wonder if we're seeing something similar again, particularly if you use a lot of curb.
I suspect that they've done some calculation. They've looked at it and said, well, we can do a little bit more or a little bit less in one or two areas. The trouble is you can't go radically soft, because if you do, then the car will just flop around all over the place. As both Ferraris come into the pit lane, Michael having completed, that's his 19th lap, and Rubens Barrichello having only completed now 11 laps.
Both cars in at the same time. Michael back out again by the looks of things. Rubens just waiting for his opportunity. So it's still David Coulthard fastest in this second free practice session. Ideal conditions here at Interlagos in Brazil. The build-up towards the 30th running of the Brazilian Grand Prix. And Juan Pablo Montoya and Ralf Schumacher. Ralf Schumacher we're looking at here for Williams BMW, hoping to back up the victory, the 1-2 finish they scored in Malaysia 2 weeks ago.
Ben, we're focusing on what's going on at the front of the field, but actually further down the field, Mark Webber in the Minardi 15th quickest. Now that's not significant in terms of the overall scheme of things this afternoon, but nonetheless, you know, Minardi working hard, Asia-Tech engine, Michelin tyres, Aussie in his third Grand Prix. Enthusiasm counts for a lot in Formula One.
It does, yes. It's not always enough, but it does help. Ralph is on a good lap here, there's no doubt. Let's just ride with him a moment. Through the area that we saw Rubens have the spin. Listen to the traction control working on the exit of corners in particular. You can hear the engine sounding as though it's misfiring. That is the electronics taking over and restricting the amount of power to those rear wheels. And that's going to be very crucial, particularly in the race itself. Now he's on brand new tyres, I gather, so this is a good indication of how fast the Williams is at this stage. Just coming up to cross the line in a moment, through the speed trap as well, and third fastest for Ralf Schumacher there.
Well, clearly the benefit of fresh rubber beginning to show through, and they've got 3 sets of tyres they're going to use today. 2 will be one compound, the third will be the alternate compound, and generally you'll go with what your manufacturer recommends, so you'll have the third set of tyres in the optional compound as opposed to what would be the prime compound. But again, nobody will tell you what those 2 tyres are.
No, that's right. It's always hard to get out information out of the teams as to what the choice is, what the difference between the tyres is, and what they'll be looking for. They keep it all very, very close to the chest, and we'll just have to guess as best as possible. Looking on down the classification, see that Irvine and De La Rosa and the 2 Jaguars still 19th and 20th. And a quick reminder, they are running with the R03 chassis. They did decide to stay with this year's car after testing back-to-back with last year's car at Barcelona.
Giancarlo Fisichella, watch how he comes through this left-hander. Basically, you've got about 3 corners before you get onto the straight.
Ooh, Elitas backs off there, lets somebody through. In fact,
Ralph.
I was just wondering why he was braking quite so much and staying wide there, but he'd obviously decided that was enough on that lap and allow Ralph through. Montoya watching from in the Williams pit garage. Villeneuve has popped up to 4th position. That is a good improvement for the BAR driver. I mentioned earlier on there have been some big cuts at BAR, changes. Some 15% of the workforce has been removed by Dave Richards, and this is just a little replay here. This was Giancarlo just letting Ralph through. No great problems there. Just had to be a bit careful running onto the dirty part of the track.
I'm not sure whether he was actually caught slightly unawares, but Fisichella pulled way to the right to let Ralph go through. Ralph having a great run up that long hill. Now there you can see what it's all about. It's about horsepower on that part of track. BMW have considered to have the most, Honda have got a bit less, and they're able to use that horsepower to make a clean and a very efficient pass coming into turn 1.
We're looking at the Jordan Honda of Fisichella, but the BAR Hondas both improving slightly. Panis has just improved his time slightly. He's still down in 11th place, but a slightly faster lap time recorded by him. Fisichella coming through, and right behind him Mika Salo. Salo not liking this track as one of his particular favourites, has never had a particularly strong result except his first season when he drove for Tyrrell. He got in the top 6. But this weekend, so far, the 2 Toyotas, McNish down in 19th place and Salo 21st.
I would say this is a more difficult circuit technically for the engineers to set a car up for, and I wouldn't expect so much today from Toyota. They just got to go out, get the laps in, get that information in, trust the feedback that the drivers are giving them, and marry the 2 elements together, the downloading from the onboard computers, look at it, and then what the driver's saying. Quite often the driver says something different to what they're getting on the telemetry, but you have to try and make the 2 things work together to give a driver a car he can then get out and do the job with.
Yes, and of course, John, Toyota, this is one of the few tracks that they didn't get to test on. They did a huge amount of testing before coming into Formula One, but they never had a chance to test here at Interlagos.
And there are probably not so many circuits in the calendar these days that have got the combination of high-speed straights, relatively medium-speed corners, then a lot of low-speed corners, plus the bumps.
Yes, it's a unique combination here, and something that the Toyota engineers no doubt are trying to get their heads around. For McNish, it's the first time to this track, so he's learning it as well. On board with Kimi Raikkonen, certainly not his first time. He was here last year for Sauber and did a fine job indeed, qualified well. He qualified in 10th place, ran in 6th place in the race for quite a while, but spun off in that rainstorm that we had about 2/3 of the way through the race. So he didn't manage to finish, but nonetheless a good opportunity to learn it. And you can see he's pushing pretty hard. Great onboard view here, right behind the front wing.
A couple of times you get that overhead shot looking down onto the front wheels, and I'm not sure whether it's maybe an effect of going over the curbing, the very slight serrations in the curbing. You're seemingly getting an oscillation on the wheel that's on the curbing. So just keep an eye and let's see whether we get that overhead shot from Kimi Raikkonen. Let's hope he takes a big bunch of curb and see if we can see something that may well have helped to the tyre company or to the team.
Let's see where this puts him as well. This lap, his teammate David Coulthard is fastest in this session so far. Well, it's nothing like as quick, so I would reckon they're running that car heavy and presumably not on new tyres at this point. As I mentioned earlier on, of course, in Malaysia they were fastest on the Friday, and that gave them some good confidence. Raikkonen setting the pace on Friday in Malaysia, and good news for him on that occasion, it didn't quite translate to qualifying, it has to be said. It was a little bit of a session, and they're hoping that they get themselves sorted out. Good setup on the Michelins in qualifying this weekend.
Well, just watching Felipe Massa, he's on a charge, having to get past Frentzen, and now also Jacques Villeneuve out on track as well. Just about completed a lap on 16.7, wasn't as quick as we thought. Massa's lifted off. We go back to David Coulthard.
Now this could be a better lap. He's already fastest overall. Let's see what this one is. Yes, another improvement, 0.2 of a second for David Coulthard, and they're putting together some good laps here. And at last, David seems to be having a session that is reasonably trouble-free. I say that.
The technical side of the business, and we've really taken the opportunity to restructure a number of areas, and it's another 10 days or so before it all bottoms out and everybody sort of settles into their new roles. So I'm not going to go into full detail this weekend. Leave it to us.
Is this one of the more difficult aspects of being a Formula One team boss, having to make changes like this?
Oh, it comes with the territory. It's like in any business, you know, if business isn't performing, you make changes. Same in a Formula One team. If you're not delivering results, you can't just carry on the same way and expect something to be different. So no changes were essential, and it's better to do them now and get on with it and move forward as quickly as we can.
Now, what about in terms of what Honda are doing at the moment? I know there's been a little bit of disappointment that Honda haven't quite produced as much horsepower as you might have hoped for. Are they working flat out on that, and what news do you have of their progress?
Yeah, they're working very well on things now. It's clearly they're, as you say, the engine hasn't come up to their expectations at the moment, but we expect a step forward by the Canadian Grand Prix in the summer, and we're already looking at structures and design for next year. So, no, it's I think all the new engine manufacturers coming back into Formula One. Renault found the initial period was quite tricky, and Honda have got a very clear plan of action now, and I feel very confident they'll deliver.
Well, thank you very much, David, and hope you have a successful weekend and get some good finishes in the bag this weekend.
In the meantime, Juan Pablo Montoya up to second quickest as we ride with Rubens Barrichello currently in fifth. So far nothing in the first sector to indicate this is anything more than an average lap from Rubens, but we're waiting for the greens to pop up, and if it's a bit special, well, we will get a red. Or actually purple as it is these days.
Purple, that's right, indicating a fastest sector time, but for the moment Rubens Barrichello just maintaining a fairly consistent pace. Remember, it's Coulthard, Montoya now second fastest, so we've got McLaren on top, we've got a Williams in second place, and then a Ferrari in third in this second free practice session. Just over 22 minutes to go of Friday running around the 2.7 mile Interlagos track. Let's just watch Barrichello cross the line. Will the fans have something to cheer about here? It's not going to be a particularly rapid one, no. Just about 2 seconds off the pace. I'm sure he's doing some fairly heavy fuel runs on worn tyres at this point in the session.
It's also important, Ben, to point out that the time this session's running is closest to what they will be doing on Sunday for the Grand Prix. The session will stop at 2 p.m, whereas the Grand Prix will start at 2 p.m. So the teams will gain information for this. Of course, in Saturday's qualifying session, they're doing one thing only, and that's going for grid position. So this is important, just to get that final little bit of information regarding which tyre you might want to choose, because that will also have a major bearing on the strategy. And as Peter Windsor told us, this is the longest pit lane in the Formula One calendar.
Now watching Pedro de la Rosa in the Jaguar R03, and again you can see the car working over the bumps coming up the hill out of Juncal there as they head up across the start-finish line. De La Rosa are currently down in 18th place, but this should see an improvement.
He's going to jump away up. Pedro de La Rosa goes up to 9th. 1.2 seconds away from David Coulthard. 1 to 9, 1.2 seconds, getting close.
Did you see how hard he was working at the steering wheel through the left-hander there, though? He was really fighting it. Took a lot of speed in and almost too much, but he managed to sort it out, so that's good news. Ralf Schumacher also on track, and we're just hearing that a number of drivers are beginning to use new tyres in the latter part of this session. McNish, who went 6th, who's now been pushed down to 8th, was definitely on new tyres when he did his run. And
Mika Salo is about to, well, in a few minutes' time, will be going out in a fresh set of rubber as we go back to Ralf Schumacher, climbing up through these plethora of low-speed first, second gear corners. So little grip, you really feel frustrated, because you know if you try to push, all you're going to do is just wash out the front of the car, or as you've seen from other drivers this morning, the back end will just break away. Doesn't matter traction control or not, it'll go into a spin.
Now is where he begins to pick up the speed. The car accelerates very quickly up this hill and then reaches its top speed, just climbing on top speed a little bit by little bit as it comes across the line to finish the straight at about 190, 195. Good final sector from him, but he remains 4th fastest overall.
Quickest of anybody in that final third sector, and very strong run from Williams right now. Don't know how old the tyres on that particular Williams are, but still a very strong run.
Now let's just watch Mika Salo. We gather that he's still on old tyres at the moment, so he won't be challenging the pace of the front runners by any means, and not even of his teammate Alan McNish. Let's just listen a moment. Up the hill. Blast past the pit lane entrance and across the line. So Mika Salo stays in 19th position in the Toyota. The 35-year-old Finn, as I mentioned, had a 5th place here for Tyrrell in 1996, but he's never qualified better than 11th on the grid throughout his career for this one. So he'll be hoping for better things, and the team is watching, trying to pick up as much data as possible.
In fact, looking into the Toyota pit, you can see the fresh set of rubber with the tyre blankets in place. They'll be brought up to a predetermined temperature. Running the back of the car very low indeed. Salo comes across start-finish line in just a moment. There it is, as Uwe Anderson stands out on the pit wall and surveys into the garage. I think they've done a really wonderful job. Brand new team put together by a man who's essentially more familiar with the world of World Rally Championship events.
That's right, yes.
Mika Salo, when he goes back out, we'd expect to see him get closer to teammate Alan McNish. McNish currently 8th quickest, but that's on fresh tyres, of course.
We seem to have an influx of people from the world of rallying at the moment in Formula 1. Dave Richards, of course, who had experience running the Benetton team in Formula 1 for a while.
Ben, the penny's dropped. This is the sport.
Well, maybe that's what it is. We've got Gunther Steiner, of course, his experience coming from rallying. He's now the sort of team manager, boss at Jaguar, working beneath Niki Lauda. And we've got Ove Anderson, who's brought Toyota into Formula 1 after running their campaign so successfully in rallying in the past. Now, Nick Heidfeld, the young German talent in the Sauber. You have to wonder, when you've got a young charger like he has alongside him in the team, I wonder how much of the setup work is being done by this man, Heidfeld, and then how much that benefits his teammate Felipe Massa.
Well, it's always a sort of contentious point of view, because if you're the man that's doing the bulk of the development using your expertise, experience, and remember, Heidfeld also was test driver or third driver, whatever they want to call it, for McLaren over a couple of years ago. And then you've got a young hot shoe like Massa comes in and nicks all your information and goes quicker than you. Well, you're going to spit the dummy at some point.
It's always a problem, and as we heard, of course, Ron Dennis talked about that a little bit concerning David Coulthard and Kimi Raikkonen last time out in Malaysia. Coulthard very fired up to establish his authority in the team, and I'm sure that battle will be very intense come qualifying tomorrow afternoon. Across the line goes Heidfeld. Again, just some consistent laps being set. This is pretty much what we would expect in the second session of free practice. No dramatic stories unless somebody has a problem. Tarso Marquez down there in pit lane, not driving in Formula 1 this year, but has, of course, had experience in Grand Prix in the past and in the Champ Car Series as well.
But also, he was one of the nominated drivers to be a part of this new Premier team, basically the team that bought up all the assets or liabilities, whichever way you look at it, of Prost's Formula 1 team. And they didn't even bother coming here, but Tarso Marquez, of course, a Brazilian here for his home Grand Prix.
Yes, plenty of Brazilians. We saw Helio Castroneves walking around early on. We had a word with him. So it's good to see plenty of support from the Brazilians for their home Grand Prix. It is the only Grand Prix in South America these days, John, which is a little bit of a shame, isn't it? No Argentinian Grand Prix.
And also no Mexican Grand Prix, which is really Central America. But at one stage we had Argentina, Brazil and Mexico. And very enjoyable. They were very different in culture. Brazil is very special, of course. 1973 was the first time that a Grand Prix came to Interlagos on the original just over 5 mile circuit. Now down to just over half that distance, 2.6 miles. And combining parts of the racetrack here, the cars return to the straight. You might be able to see there to the right, that tarmac, that was the original exit onto the pit straight. So much tighter and much more steep incline than that we used here, well, when I first came here in 1974.
Well, Emerson Fittipaldi was twice a winner on the old track here at Interlagos, and in many ways it was Fittipaldi's efforts that created so much of a following for motorsports and for Formula 1 in Brazil, wasn't it, John? And then, of course, after Emerson had great success, Nelson Piquet came along. He was twice a winner in Rio. Let's just listen a moment. See if we can learn anything from the radio. Little moments captured on radio, which is sometimes quite hard. But just coming back to that Brazilian theme, Fittipaldi really infusing the fans in Brazil. Piquet, Senna coming after that, of course. There is tremendous passion for it.
Of course, but don't forget Jose Carlos Pache, who this circuit is now named after. Carlos Pache, my teammate. Sadly, very briefly, for just a couple of races in 1977, Carlos tragically lost his life in a flying accident in March of that year, and a man who, particularly in the Brabham team, was loved by everybody. Great motivator of people, had a love of life. That was sadly missing today in Formula One.
Yes, very sad that Carlos was killed in 1977. He's very much a contemporary of Fittipaldi, and potentially with great success ahead of him. The Interlagos track named after him, as you mentioned, John, and out on track at the moment. Quite a few cars. Oh, and off the track, that is one of the Toyotas. Is that McNish? I think it is. Yes, it is. Alan McNish, who's run wide off the track, and that's a great shame. But I think he's managed to keep it running, so hopefully it won't affect his challenge that much. Back on he comes. Sits still. Coulthard fastest from Montoya, and McNish third fastest. Good third fastest on that last lap on for McNish, and that really is impressive for the Toyota. Once again, it puts him ahead of Michael Schumacher. Ralf Schumacher 5th, Button 6th, Barrichello 7th, Villeneuve 8th, De La Rosa 9th, Panis 10th, and Fisichella, Massa and Heidfeld pushed a bit further down. Then Raikkonen, Bernaldi, Frentzen, Sato 17th, and Webber in 18th, Sarlo in 19th, ahead of Trulli, Irvine and Alex Young. Just remind you, Trulli not getting any laps in really in this second session because of an electronics problem. Now here's a repeat of what happened to Alan McNish.
Well, he just got a wheel on the exit of the curb, decided that better to go straight off track than try and get around the corner, but well, made a bit of a meal about it, but at least he got the car back on track, no damage, maybe just a little bit of pride. We just saw a glimpse of Fisichella coming in out of the centre chicane, really getting the car moving around. Should be pointed out that Jose Carlos Pache won the Brazilian Grand Prix, of course, in 1975 for the Brabham team, and that was a remarkable day for the Brazilian and for the Brabham team. The party that night went on forever.
Quite difficult to understand what Alan's saying there.
Especially if I'm talking over him.
Well, no, it wasn't just that. It was it sounds like he's out in a goldfish bowl or something, but hopefully we'll be able to hear a little more of that as the session continues, or as we get into the rest of the weekend. We'll be listening out for our onboard radio coverage. Now, what's happened to Giancarlo Fisichella here? Let's take a look.
You think it's opposite lock? Yeah, you could almost anticipate it. It wasn't going to be understeer there. And Fisichella strong so far this weekend, but dropping down to 11th place. Doesn't matter so much. Again, they're probably running on one set of tyres, done a lot of laps. If they're looking at a one-stop race, you're going to have to go to lap 35 to 40. And tyre wire, tyre degradation, all these things have got to be thought about.
Luciano Berti keeping a close eye on proceedings as Michael Schumacher gets ready to come back out. He's 4th fastest at the moment in the new Ferrari.
And I bet you a penny to a pound on a brand new set of rubber.
Meanwhile, Montoya also on track at this stage, as you can see, and currently 2nd fastest to David Coulthard in the overall standings. First segment, well, he's about 0.3 of a second down. And there we can hear.
Well, that wasn't ship to shore, that was pits to pits, I think.
That's right, yeah, that's into
those are
team
tyres. I think there's sets of tyres. Each tyre set will be, well, it wouldn't be 56 sets, but they'll have codes and so on and so forth for each team to determine what to do. Montoya pushing very hard. Listen to the traction control as he comes out. 55, 57.5. I'm not too worried about 1.3 down at that second intermediate.
Again, presumably running on fairly old tyres at this point in the session, but we may see him. We've heard them talking about getting another set of tyres ready for him, so he'll be coming out on a new set in a little while, but of course he may still be running with a very full tank, trying to simulate what will happen in the race itself, because of course you'll be coming back into the pits, refueling, putting new tyres on and then blasting back out, and that's often what they're simulating here on the Friday.
Yeah, that set of tyres on Montoya, they're not new ones, but they don't look that old. Likewise David Coulthard, we see now he's 0.7 of a second down on his current fastest, climbs up the hill. The right hand side of the track suddenly looms up as you just come to the top, that third part of the exit. All of a sudden the right side of the track right with you before you realise it. Look how
7th place, and then Barrichello in 8th, Villeneuve in 9th, and Pedro de la Rosa in 10th position.
So 3 British drivers in the top 7. That's not something we've seen for a few years.
No, that's good news. Good to see that. Let's hope that we can see more of that in qualifying tomorrow. Look at the slow motion pictures.
But just watch the tyre. Watch if he goes across the curb. See that oscillation? You see that front tyre? See the way it's wobbling? Now, I don't know whether that's because of the curbings causing that or whether the construction of the Michelin tyre is such that it's doing that. But certainly, I noticed it earlier in the session, and there you could see it clearly in that super slow-mo replay.
Yeah, great pictures once again from F1 Digital, getting right into the action and seeing things that just normally wouldn't see. Watching Kimi Räikkönen here, but Coulthard, his teammate, is on a very good lap again himself. So David is doing everything that everyone said he's got to, and that's really stamp his authority in this race, in the practice sessions, qualifying sessions, particularly show Kimi Räikkönen who's boss in the team. That's what David's trying to do perhaps today, a little bit of psychological edge, and he's on a quick lap here.
And so disconsolate after the debriefing in Malaysia, came out and said to the press, well, basically, it's almost over for me in the championship. I've got to win the next 2 races to get myself back into the frame. Well, he's starting the weekend off the right way by being at the quickest, being at the top of the times. Can Coulthard improve in this lap? I doubt it very much.
No, he lost a lot on the middle sector. I would guess that, again, he's not on new tyres because he was very fast over the first sector, but the middle sector where you're looking at mechanical grip all the time, really he lost a second there. So I'd imagine that, again, the tyres probably past their best. There's the standings then. McNish in 3rd place, ahead of the 2 Schumachers. Now remember last year the 2 Schumachers shared the front row of the grid. They went on to do that on some 6 occasions during 2001. And I'm sure that they will be both battling for pole come tomorrow, but so will this man.
Indeed, S1 Pablo Montoya. And we just got a glimpse of Mika Salo leaving the pits on a brand new set of rubber. He'll want to join his teammate. 3rd, 4th, he'll take either.
Right, Rubens Barrichello, 7th position for him at the moment, so 15.933, slight improvement in time there, but it hasn't moved him up much on the order. Again, you can see him using the curb, especially through the right-hand part of the Centre S. Now, building up to about 185 miles an hour along this straight before they get on the brakes for the double apex left-hander. Back with Coulthard again. Certainly, the way he's driving the car looks confident, doesn't he?
Yes, I think David needs a car that really does give him that confidence. In Malaysia, part of the reason why he had so many offs was because the car was a very nervy, twitchy front-end car. That does not suit David Coulthard's driving style. He likes to drive the car from the rear wheels. He wants to throw it into the corner and let the bite come from the back and not from the front. Räikkönen, very much like Mika Häkkinen in that respect, he wants it all in the front. So if you give Coulthard a Häkkinen car or a Räikkönen car, he's not going to be able to drive it.
Well, this was a track that always suited Mika Häkkinen. And off goes the Ferrari. That's Michael Schumacher. Now, that extra grippy asphalt might have saved him.
End of the pit straight.
End of the pit straight into the Centre S. That's where he's gone off. But, well, there you are. You wouldn't have been able to do that if you'd had a gravel track.
Not at all. Michael Schumacher must have been very late on the brakes, because that is not normally the kind of position you'd expect to see somebody. Either they'll spin it by trying to take the corner, but Michael opted for something different. Let's look and see. Wait for the lockup. Is it going to come? Whoa, the back end. Maybe there's just a hint. Whoa, ride him, cowboy. Look at that.
Now, it's not often you see Michael Schumacher getting into a tank slapper situation like that, is it?
He's on the old part of the racetrack, but again, that's now laid in that super sticky, high-friction tarmac. Stopped him going into the tyre barrier, saved any damage to the car.
Great news, and of course means he's still in the session. Now, take a look at this one. Ralf Schumacher's on a good lap here, and it's enough for 4th fastest.
But his teammate Montoya quickest. Ralf gets it wrong in Senna's chicane. Montoya quickest in the first segment. We're not watching. This is Ralf Schumacher. And Pablo Montoya we're now with. Let's see what he can do in that second segment.
Yes, let's watch him through the tight stuff here. Coming into the hairpin right, uses the curb. That looked pretty quick through there, carrying a lot of speed. Again, uses the curve through the left hand. A little short straight here, not much time to be on the power. Then back on the brakes, down through the gears. And now watch the hands on the steering wheel. Not having to correct much. The traction control cutting in. This corner's almost flat out, and in qualifying, if they're doing it well, they should be flat out through that.
He's got Kimi Räikkönen ahead of him. Räikkönen probably either on an outlapper coming into the pits. It's too early just to say. Eddie Irvine was further down the road. Räikkönen not and any problem is going to be clear. Montoya will not have. So Montoya, can he? No, he's not. But it looked very, very good. That first sector time, quickest of any we've seen so far this afternoon or today.
Trying to listen to the radio, but getting a bit of interference on that. There's Sam Michael talking to Patrick Head, the engineering brains behind Williams, and keeping a close monitor on all of the lap times being set in the latter stages of this free practice session. Only 45 seconds remain, and is anyone else going to pop in a quick lap, or is David Coulthard going to end up as fastest with Alan McNish third fastest?
But Mika Salo, we saw him go out in brand new tyres. He's had a personal best in the first sector, personal best in second sector, currently 17th. As we look back at Ralf Schumacher to see whether he can do anything, just over a tenth of a second away, but it's in this sector that he'll make or break his lap.
Well, let's keep an eye on Ralph's progress. Winner last time out in Malaysia, certainly taking advantage of the mishaps for Michael Schumacher and Juan Pablo Montoya, but having said that, Ralph drove a brilliant race and may well have won it anyway with the sort of pace and the decisions of strategy that they took for his car. He will see the checkered flag when he comes around this time. I don't think that this lap is going to be anything that will change the order as it stands. Coulthard, I think, is going to end up as fastest on Friday in Brazil.
Montoya quickest across start finish line, 317 kilometers per hour. Well, it's a gnat's off 200 miles an hour.
And here comes Ralph to cross the line now. Will this change fourth for him? No, he remains in fourth place. It's Coulthard from Montoya from McNish. Alan McNish in the top three for the first time in a Formula One session, with Ralf Schumacher fourth, Michael Schumacher in fifth, Kimi Räikkönen in sixth, and then Barrichello, Button, Villeneuve and De La Rosa, the top 10 times from Friday free practice. Well, you have to say that that's new Ferrari, John. We perhaps didn't see everything from it, but it was working extremely well. Mika Salo's just about to finish off a lap. He was in 15th. Let's see if this improves his position. Should pop him. No, not much. No, it doesn't change it. Stays in 15th place, and he'll be coming in.
I'm not sure whether Salo will be disappointed or not. Again, it will depend on the amount of fuel on board his car. He did go out on brand new tyres towards the end. We expected to see an increase in speed, a reduction of lap times, but if he's running maybe a race load of fuel on new tyres again, the team are just using their two drivers productively to gain as much information as possible. McNish did the qualifying attempt this time, and Salo's probably a race setup, fresh tyres, to check it out how it is as we get to 2 o'clock.
Well, it's a good day for Scotland with their drivers first and third in Friday free practice. As we all know, it may not mean anything when it comes to qualifying itself. As you say, John, I'm sure McNish did a simulated qualifying run effectively today, unlike most of the top teams who would have kept lots of fuel in their cars. But still great to see his name up there. Montoya's name up there as well. Both Williams in the top 4. Michael Schumacher in a very threatening looking 5th position. There is McNish just finishing off his lap and coming into the pits now, ending up the session 3rd fastest. I think we've got just about all the cars in now. The last two to come in are Fisichella and Bernoldi. They're just making their way out of the final couple of corners. Juan Pablo Montoya gets out of the Williams. I wonder if he'll be pleased with today's work. A 1:15.345, 3/10 of a second slower than McLaren's best time today.
I think they'll be pretty happy. They will have gone through their day's work. They'll have done, I think, principally what they had set out to achieve. And while there's pressure to some degree in being quickest, it doesn't actually mean an awful lot. It's good for David Coulthard. He had a terrible start to the season, and it seemed like the season was just about to fall apart on him, but he's quickest this afternoon.
And similar to Malaysia, we saw Bridgestone's dominating first free practice, but once the rubber goes down, the temperature comes up, the Michelin runners seem to be putting in quick times. And there you can see all the M's indicating Michelin users. Coulthard fastest from Montoya, McNish, and then the two Schumachers. Kimi Räikkönen ahead of Rubens Barrichello, Jenson Button up there as well, Jacques Villeneuve in 9th, and Pedro de la Rosa in 10th. Now I wonder if that's indicative that they've actually found a bit of pace relative to the other teams, or whether they just pumped some fuel out and went for a quicker time. We won't really know until we get into qualifying tomorrow. The two arrows very evenly matched. Look, only a few thousandths of a second separating Frentzen from Bernoldi. And then Panis in 13th place in the other BAR. There's Irvine in 14th. ahead of Sarlo, who obviously didn't put in a sort of qualifying run during that session. Fisichella ended up down in 16th, was a surprise, and Massa and Heidfeld, all those guys were going so well in the first free practice, and then they end up nowhere in the second one.
Well, I think we don't need to take too much of this as being what we can expect on Sunday. The grid will be shuffled around, certainly by qualifying tomorrow. And I don't see anything other than the usual suspects being in their regular places. It doesn't take too many races to determine the pecking order of teams relative to each other. The one that's probably going to move forward most is the Renault team. We've been talking about that. And Jenson Button, you could see his walk back to the pits indicates a new degree of confidence and assurance from this young man.
Well, there he is. There's Alan McNish. Great to see him having a good day today, the 32-year-old. Peter's there with him. Let's hear from him.
Alan, 1-3 for Scotland, and a few Schumachers behind you as well today.
Yeah, we're trying to make up for the 5-0 beating we got at football on Wednesday night. It was quite a good session. The car seems reasonable around here. We do have to make it a little bit better for the race, but you know, I think it was a pretty good start, and also from my point of view, the first time being here.
What do you think of the circuit?
Yeah, it's quite nice. It's quite hard. There's no question about it. The centre section's the key, and there's a few corners there where you've got to have a bit of a bravado, because they're blind adverse camber ones in sort of fourth gear. So, you know, it has got its technical aspects to it.
And you had a bit of an excursion there at the end.
Yeah, I was pushing too hard basically, and the tyre had dropped a little bit of grip, and I got onto the kerb on the outside of the corner through 6, which is a uphill right-hand blind corner, and the only way to recover the situation was to do some rallycross.
Very nice it looked too.
Yeah, it looked better than it felt. It didn't feel very good, and I'm pretty sure the engineers watching the TV weren't very impressed.
Well, very best of luck for the rest of the weekend.
Thank you very much.
Well, we can have a word now with Juan Pablo Montoya of the Williams team, second fastest after the second session. Juan Pablo, second so far. What are the chances you can go one better on Sunday?
I think, you know, we have to wait and see what happens during the weekend, but the car seems to be working quite well today. You know, we did our homework basically, checked and everything. So we really have to wait and see what happens.
I've heard you quoted as saying you like the atmosphere in Brazil. What's so good about this race?
It's really good because, you know, people are really Latin and more open, and the fans cheer more. It's pretty exciting.
And what about the mood in the Williams Cup? We saw the lads before the first session, and they seemed very relaxed, very happy, very upbeat. Do they feel like favourites?
I don't think we're favourites. You know, I think we got a good car, we got a good chance, but I would say, you know, we are the favourites. I don't think you can really think that. I think we're doing basically, like always, every Friday, our homework, try the things we need to try, and make sure, you know, we're ready for tomorrow. And you know, I'm pretty happy. I made a mistake in my last set of tires today, and I was purple in sector 1, so it's a bit disappointing, but it doesn't really matter.
You were unlucky at this race last year. You didn't win when you could have done 2 weeks ago in Malaysia. Is it about time your luck turned?
Well, we'll see. Whenever it's going to turn, it's going to turn. Now I've got to just keep pushing every race, and we'll see what happens.
Pablo, good luck. Thanks for joining us. OK, let's have a look back at the highlights from the second qualifying session or practice session for the Brazilian Grand Prix.
in terms of weather conditions, and a pretty perfect day for David Coulthard. No mechanical problems. He had one little spin in the beginning of the first free practice session. After that, it all went well for him, and he has ended up with the fastest time of the day.
And David will be happy with that, so will McLaren, but mostly Mercedes-Benz, because they've been under the cosh about the team's performance in the first 2 Grand Prix of the season. Admittedly, it's only Friday afternoon, and admittedly they're some 1.3 seconds off last year's pole. But I would say that's par for the course, the way things are in Formula One, and if we can see an improvement on last year's pole, well, that would be to look forward to tomorrow afternoon.
Yes, it should promise to be another very interesting battle for pole position. You know, despite Michael having a great finishing record here in Interlagos, he's only taken pole once, and that was last year. So we'll see whether he can take pole position. Often he works on great race setup and has had some brilliant race performances with those 3 victories. I wonder if pole position will be a tough battle between himself, the 2 Williams BMWs, I'm sure, and I wonder if McLaren Mercedes can actually, for the first time this year, become a part of that battle.
Well, I most certainly do hope that we will see a battle between the 3 lead teams, 6 cars. Maybe the man who's got the short straw this weekend will be Rubens Barrichello, but he'll want to put his Ferrari somewhere near the front. It is his home Grand Prix, but as we've seen in the past, Rubens has never had a happy Grand Prix in Brazil. As we look across the circuit and over towards the city, or a minute part of it, believe me.
Yeah, it's such a massive, sprawling city is Sao Paulo, the sort of industrial strength of Brazil in many ways. And although this track, when it was originally built, was some way away from Sao Paulo, the city has gradually spread southwards so that it actually almost surrounds the track itself. Also had a quick glimpse just a moment ago of the kart track, which is on this circuit as well. A specific 100cc kart track where so many great drivers honed their talents before moving up through the ranks of motor racing and eventually up to Formula One. Felipe Massa, for example, from Sao Paulo himself originally, and was karting from 9 years old on the track down here. And now, of course, he finds himself in Formula One, driving for the Sauber team and being rated as one of the best newcomers to Formula One. So the team's now settled down for a busy afternoon and evening's work to get the cars prepared for Saturday, where we'll see 2 more free practice sessions in the morning, 2 45-minute sessions, which we will, of course, be covering in full detail, and then a little pause before they get into the real business of qualifying, which will be so crucial, not only for honour, but also in terms of trying to be up front for the start of the race on Sunday. Let's hope the weather conditions remain as they have been. It's been just about perfect today. The sweltering mugginess of Malaysia left behind. It's been very, very hot, but just a little more able to breathe in Brazil than they were in Malaysia. Well, I hope you've enjoyed watching all our coverage, our live coverage from the track itself, and seen all the action close up in unrivaled, uninterrupted, interactive coverage here on Digital Formula One. And for the moment, we're going to go back to the studio to join John Watson and Matt Lorenzo to round up the activities and what happened today here at Interlagos.